Welcome to This Week, Next Week, an episode from Group M, the investment arm of WPP. I'm joined today by Jeff Foster and Nidhi Shah. How's everyone doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, it's the sun's out, so I'm in a good mood. That's a good start to a Friday.
The sun's out
Definitely.
there too. It's here out bright and shining this week in London as well. So
Excellent. So we've got a good pod for the day. We're going to run through some global economics, focus on the US. We are going to talk about European media owners that reported this week, and then get into some of our largest global media owners as well. There was a big conflab here in San Francisco with a TMT conference. So that's all ahead. But guys, I'm excited. I have an idea. All right. So I'm going to put out a report, a book, right? I've got the most amazing title. It's going to make everyone want to read it. Are you ready? It's
Okay.
called The Beige Book.
I mean, when I think of beige, I just think of excitement. So
Don't you?
yeah, I'm ready for this.
Super exciting. I mean, everyone wants to open the Beige Book. That is, of course, the name of the US Fed's book on economic conditions. So maybe it's the right term given how dry probably most people find the text inside. That came out this week for February. It's released 8 times a year. I pulled just a couple of statements from the opening pages that give an overview. Consumer spending was lower on balance, with reports of solid demand for essential goods, mixed with increased price sensitivity for discretionary items, particularly among lower income shoppers, which is exactly what we've been saying. It's what Target said when they spoke this week about what they're seeing in stores as well. This move to, essentials and a divergence again between what we talked about last week, sort of that top 10% of the US economy and everyone else. They did say vehicle sales were modestly lower on balance. And then there were, of course, differences by region as well. This I thought was really interesting in terms of when we're talking about advertisers and passing on price increases and inflation. They said prices increased moderately in most districts, but several districts reported an uptick in the pace of increase relative to the previous period. Firms in multiple districts noted difficulty passing input costs on to customers. However, contacts in most districts expected potential tariffs on inputs would lead them to raise prices. Some of them isolated reports of firms raising prices preemptively. What does that say to you?
Wow. So we're gonna be spending a lot more for the same goods. That's my take.
Yeah. Nidhi?
yeah, I mean, price increases more on the back of the recent increases we've had in the last 2 years. I mean, it doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it feels like everything's becoming a luxury purchase. Like even eggs are a luxury item now.
Yeah, you buy them when you find a good price for sure in
Right.
the US right now. Now that less to do with
Right.
tariffs and more to do with avian flu here, but I do think these are going to be top of mind, especially in terms of being able to pass costs on. Now I have to check the news every 2 hours to see where we are with tariffs. I think at the moment there's been a reprieve for most or all of the goods that are covered in the last trading agreement. There were a couple of quotes. We had some tech companies reporting this week. HP said that HP's outlook reflects the added cost driven by the current U.S. tariff increases on China and associated mitigations. The company has made significant progress building a globally diverse supply chain, and by the end of fiscal year 2025, expects more than 90% of HP products sold in North America will be built outside of China. China will continue to be an important manufacturing hub for the rest of the world. So we are starting to see companies, again, preemptively, even in the face of uncertainty about what's going to happen, making sure that they have a plan going forward. Lenovo also, this is a great quote tying in challenges and sponsorships, which we talked about last week.
Yeah.
The group utilizes contingency plans to address new challenges, including technology export controls and data usage regulations, while investing in brand equity through FIFA and F1 sponsorships.
Wow, that's quite a quote tying in sponsorships and economic challenges. Who
Yeah.
knew?
F1 in particular, fascinating because I actually we did some work for a client around viewership numbers for F1. Any guesses as to some of the top markets for F1 viewership?
UAE?
Yes, MENA, Middle East, North Africa, absolutely, yes. In terms of let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 markets here. Middle East, North Africa is the largest of those,
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah. In terms of overall, I've like summed up the viewership per races, yeah. Any others, Jeff?
Oh wow, I'm gonna say there's got to be some European markets in there, right?
Yep.
Am I close?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep, France and Italy, definitely.
Okay.
Then the US, then Germany. Those are, again, of the ones that we had time to collate. Those are the ones we had. Monaco, of course, hugely popular in terms of the races, which cities they occur in. Saudi Arabia, obviously, very critical to the Middle East viewership. And then Miami, actually pretty popular in terms of US. And then UK as well, storied history there for racing.
Yeah.
But that was a bit of fun. You never know what data you're going to see in a week, but F1 audience numbers, great.
Yeah. No, it definitely has a strong global following.
Yes. One other thing on tariffs I noticed, and we're specifically related to advertising and media owners, just quickly before we move on to Europe. There was actually a letter sent from the Newspaper Association to committee members within government asking them to look at tariffs with Canada in particular, because that's where a lot of newsprint comes from. And so the concerns about when you're already facing declining subscribers in the US, especially for local newspapers, the increased costs of newsprint there are, I think their argument was really threatening local news and jobs on the ground. So that was an interesting read, again, tied directly to impacts for media owners in the US. We'll see where that all nets out. We had a lot of activity in the European media space this week, Nidhi.
Yes, lots going on this week. We had European media owners within the TV and out-of-home space report this week. If we start with TV first, which tends to be one of my favorite spaces to kind of talk about, and a reason for that is also the fact that there's sometimes a perception within Europe that linear TV trends are more positive than they actually should be, and that case is likely to remain in in the next 5-year period, which is our forecast period. And according to RT1Y data, TV kind of accounts for that slightly higher share of total advertising within the Europe region. And, it is an effective part of the marketing mix. I think what is kind of sometimes forgotten is that the local factors driving this are not always going to stay the same. So in Central Eastern Europe, for example, we have the lack of entrance within the streaming space and the kind of ad capabilities on these platforms as well, due to the operating costs, means there's been kind of a positive linear growth compared to other markets within Europe, such as UK, Germany, and France, which are seeing linear TV decline.
Do you think we're going to get there? Like, is it just they're too small right now? And once they've gone out to the bigger markets, then they'll, start focusing on some of these smaller European markets?
Yes, I definitely think so. And, I think if we just take an example for Germany, right, there are local nuances within that market, one of which is the fact that Germany has had a low home ownership rate, about 47.3%, according to Eurostat. So why is this kind of relevant for, what we're talking about? I mean, landlords were allowed to charge tenants for cable TV as part of their rental agreements, and this rule changed last year. And I think going forward, some of these local dynamics, Germany being an example, there's that shift as well on more people using the internet, that impacting who's going to be streaming, and the entrance of more global players is always kind of good for competition, which I think we'll see more European markets, especially the smaller ones, reporting declines, echoing the kind of trends we're seeing in the US.
So in Germany, if people aren't already paying for cable TV, so they might as well watch it and not pay extra for streaming services. But if their landlords are no longer able to, tack on that cost for cable TV as part of the broader utilities, then maybe they opt out of that, and we are moving to more of a combination of streaming services like we're seeing in the US. That's what we're saying, right?
Exactly
Fascinating.
that. And I think even just looking at this week's results from broadcasters and the kind of TV space overall, ITV and ProSieben confirmed the challenges within the space and the weaknesses. So, ITV mentioned that ad revenue would be impacted against the Euro's tough comparables, and the tight ad restrictions on the less healthy foods kicking in October. But it's kind of clear to everyone, right, that streaming and sports are still good opportunities for these broadcasters. Just looking at some of the the ad revenue results, from 2024, the growth in streaming is not fully offsetting the declines in linear, especially in the absence of sports. So if you look at ITV results, that full year 2.4% ad revenue growth looks good, but the quarter four ad revenue decline, which was about 7%, this was when there was no sports such as Euros or rugbies, for example, kind of helping support that positive overall growth. That's a similar picture with ProSieben as well. Advertising revenue declined by 2% and further 9% in the fourth quarter, not offsetting the strong growth from digital.
Well, in both those markets, there's quite a strong free to air. The BBC has the Olympics rights in the UK. In Germany, I know there's a lot of sports that are shown on non-ad supported television as well. So that feels like one question is how much appetite is there for ad supported streamers, either local or international, to come in and bid for more of those rights? And then, do they have the budgets locally and regionally to retain those if there's competition or interest from global players like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or someone like that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think it also comes back to the business model side of things. Like one of the key themes that I've been hearing from both these broadcasters is the focus on diversification of revenue streams.
Mm.
So, ITV mentioning kind of lesser reliance on the more traditional advertising and more on content production and digital, which already accounts for 2/3 of their revenue. And, they've also entered into partnerships with players like YouTube. ITV commercials are now, selling the advertising around ITV's content on the platform, and, they've got a dedicated YouTube sales team for that. So moving beyond, just traditional forms of advertising and focusing, where partnerships can cover that digital ad revenue growth going forward. I think, and also beyond advertising, there's also interest in gaming space. They've got ITV Win, which is kind of like the free competition and games. They've even got the platform Cushing, which is a consumer-facing platform where shoppers can save money online. So different kind of areas building up.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Amazon having an entirely different revenue model too means, and to some extent, I don't know how much these things are kept separately, but if you have a very high margin business, say like AWS and cloud, and you're able to use some of that to fund content purchases. I mean, I know there have been conversations or reports recently that they want to look at profitability within Prime Video and make sure that they're making sound, maybe more conservative decisions there going forward. But having that diversification, having high margin revenue lines within the business does maybe allow you to move stuff around when and where you need to. So very interesting. We will come back to YouTube and this concept of aggregators, I think, a little bit later on. But should we dip into, you said out of home as well?
Yeah, I think just taking you talking about Amazon as well, like this week there were news reports that they're launching linear channels in Germany and Austria for April, which is interesting. But yeah, if we go into out of home as well, just the kind of strong growth relative to TV, despite China's, lack of recovery. JCDecaux reported about 9.7 organic growth. Stroer reported about 11.5, and for JCDecaux in particular, transport still showing high growth. What was interesting was UK was the fastest growing amongst the markets they operate in, about 18.4%, which is quite high. I think one of the interesting things about the results was the disclosure of programmatic advertising revenue. The group reported that about 9.5% of digital revenue going to out of home was through programmatic.
Yeah, the travel transport thing. I mean, some of that will be commuter and some of it will be airports, presumably. But that was another thing from the Beige book I think I picked up in the US, that travel was one of the more resilient pieces, at least in jobs as well. So feels like people are still traveling for now.
Yeah, I think I need to book my holiday soon.
Yeah. Sunny this week, you're fine.
Yeah. For now.
If we come back to YouTube, Jeff, and this sort of concept of where we're looking at the new aggregators, we've talked about decline of cable, both in the US and now potentially, heightening that or faster potential declines across parts of Europe as scenarios change in each of those markets. One of the things we've talked about within this year, next year in our reporting for a while is this concept of new aggregators and potentially being tech focused, right? If you have Apple TV or Fire TV via Amazon, Google tvOS, either the owners of the hardware or the software. So Roku would be another one I'd throw into that mix. Potentially even someone like a Microsoft if you're viewing content through your gaming console. But we did hear from YouTube on this week.
Yeah, we did. So it's sort of this battle for, I guess, the living room that's going on, as you were just mentioning. So YouTube announced that they're preparing to launch a significant redesign of its TV app. So they're trying to make it mimic more of the experience of a Netflix, making it very user friendly. They're doing this to try to position themselves as the primary streaming hub, competing directly with Amazon. And this new interface will integrate paid content from various streaming services directly into the homepage. So assuming probably similar to what you see like on Amazon. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And it's going to be a combination of probably, user interface, ease, what kind of device you have, what operating system you have. But this is definitely picking up a lot, I think, as you kind of see as more and more, you're battling for attention and as more people are, viewing TV through connected TVs. And what is the definition of television all starts to blur. I think, this is an important step for YouTube.
Yeah, and I think potentially, well, we'll see. In terms of churn, we are looking at data from providers like Antenna that say, yes, churn is a problem, but actually a lot of people come back to the service within a few months anyway.
Right.
But if there's an easy way, potentially, Apple, Amazon, Google get a cut. But if it makes it easy for consumers to turn that back on or manage subscriptions, you can see where, from a consumer experience point of view and being able to view everything in one place, find it easily, hopefully, that
exactly.
some
I think it's
attraction.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's that ease and that convenience of knowing I can log on to one hub. I don't have to enter in passwords or toggle out of apps or go into a different app just to find the content I want. So, I'm very curious to see what this looks like when it starts to get rolled out.
Well, and how much longer it's going to. It feels like we've been in this phase of, when we talk about cycles of aggregation and then, unbundling or disaggregation. We've been in this messy bit for a period. So I'm curious to see how smoothly the aggregation will come together.
This is more of like an inflection point for the rebundling and just kind of creating a traditional, cable model, but back through digital and streaming.
Yes, exactly.
Sure what it feels like, but we'll see.
Everything is a circle. We know that by now, surely.
Exactly.
I was also the Morgan Stanley TMT Conference in San Francisco this week. So we got a
Yeah,
few news
so
from that. I mean,
yeah,
I think earth-shattering.
yeah, I don't know, it's kind of a little bit of a muted conference. Obviously, it's coming on the back of earnings, so we're hearing a lot of very similar things that we just heard over the last few weeks. I would say, looking at the high level, a lot of talk about advertising, DTC, live events, sports, content spend. So those are kind of the big themes. Again, very similar to what we were hearing. I would say a few things kind of jumped out, when looking at some of the major media companies. Fox, for example, shed a little bit more light on their DTC product. It's going to be, they're focused again a little bit more on the cordless universe, and they're going to be priced to avoid cannibalizing their traditional cable bundles. So kind of a little bit more clarity on that. Their numbers were pretty modest, probably about 5 million subscribers is what they're looking at. And Lachlan said that if he ever saw Tom Brady hawking this service on traditional television, that would make his head explode. So they're not. It doesn't sound like they're going to be marketing this a lot. It's just more going to be just kind of picking up, cord cutters and cord nevers. Obviously, pricing is going to be a factor, but it's yeah.
Feels worth the tech costs for 5 million subscribers. I mean, okay, maybe they've already built it. We talked about this on a previous podcast, right? For
Right.
me, it makes more sense to build it into Tubi. You have one thing that you're
Correct.
managing, and there's paid content and there's free content. I know they brought Jeff over from Apple to
Yes.
run this, and so I guess there's some element of we've already got this stuff up and running, but okay.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that fits into the market. Sounds like a very niche service, but we'll see. The power of the NFL. It was interesting. They also did hint, as we've been talking about on this podcast, it's definitely getting more and more traction about the NFL's opt out. If that's coming sooner than later. So he did get a question of how that, how they're thinking about that, and Lachlan mentioned that would help deepen their relationship with the NFL. I think he described it as more of an amend and extend than an opt out.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting to see. So yeah, they also kind of hinted out, based on the success of the Super Bowl and Tubi, that perhaps in a new NFL agreement, maybe there might be more football on Tubi to give it more of a digital component. So
Yep.
that was interesting. And then was in that DTC world, one other small tidbit: Fox Nation, which is Fox's news, is DTC product, has 2 to 2.5 million subscribers. They almost never disclose that number, so that was interesting to hear that. But again, very more of a niche service, appealing to Fox News super fans is how
New
they
data.
describe it.
We love it.
Yep,
Programmatic
new data,
numbers
right?
for out of home, any subscriber numbers, we'll take it all.
Yeah, we're living in a very transparent world.
We need a tip line where people can alert us to the first time someone's announced something. I think that would be great.
Exactly. And then just a couple other points there from the conference. Netflix also made some noise about how they plan to double their ad business this year, their ad-supported business. And they said that based off of their current content spending of around 18 billion, that they don't see a ceiling in the foreseeable future. So read into that as you may.
That's really interesting. I mean, as little as a year ago, they were saying they felt pretty good about that 17 billion kind of size, but now they're
Yeah.
starting to talk about maybe Oscars or more
Right.
football, more live sports. There's
It-
a feeling that may not.
Yeah, I'm feeling that number might be a little squishy. So they did say that Netflix is open to longer duration live events. Now, I can think of one that just aired, a longer duration live event at the Oscars, whose rights are coming up. So interesting that all kind of surfaced up. So that was another interesting thing that popped up in that conference.
It wasn't that long ago when people were saying Netflix movies shouldn't be eligible because they hadn't aired in cinemas, and now they're talking about.
And no, Netflix might be the home of the Oscars. Yeah, again, everything comes full circle. So it's this is just the world we're living in. And then just a few other notes. Disney just again stressed how advertising is going to be very important to their growth in the foreseeable future across linear streaming and sports. So they were definitely, high on the advertising business. And then over at Warner Brothers, a little bit more of the same of what we heard for their earnings. When was it? Last week. that they still feel that they have great assets now, mainly on the scripted side. And they described their decision not to renew the NBA as a great decision. So we'll see. We'll see what the future holds for that. And then they again reiterated how they view sports as a rental business. So yeah, definitely taking a little, I mean, they're still, they still have sports, but definitely taking a little bit of a different approach compared to the other large media companies in the sports space.
At least one person who agrees with Zaslav that it was a great decision. Maybe Alan Moss, our head of ads at
Yes, correct.
Yep.
I'm sure they will not be shedding a tear for that. So, yeah, interesting. And again, they kind of reiterated how they're implementing a 10-year attack strategy, emphasizing their scripted materials, and they want to put another focus back on horror content through New Line, which, historically horror is cheap to produce and usually has, oversized returns at the box office and on television. So we'll see how that
Not for
goes.
me. I do not like horror.
You're not a horror super fan?
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so that, and of course they have their main franchises of Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and Harry Potter, which, are incredible IP, but
Yeah.
it's just a question of not cheap to produce those types of that type of content. So we'll see on that.
Yes, I'm excited. We're about the age we can start reading the Hobbit with the kids. So
Oh,
this is a
nice.
good
Yeah.
guess. Excellent. Well, this weekend and into next week, hopefully we all continue to have decent weather. That's first on the agenda. We'll keep watching out for new economics news as well. And rugby is back this weekend, Six Nations. So I'll be watching that. Nidhi, how about you?
I'll be watching the India and New Zealand cricket match this Sunday. Cricket is one of the favorite sports I've grown up watching, so really, really excited for that.
And Jeff, how about you?
Yes, I'll be diving back into Severance, which we're coming up on, almost getting towards the end of the season, and have a few guilty pleasures lined up that I've recorded, some of the Bravo shows. So we'll have to dive into those now that the seasons are over, so I can binge watch that in one afternoon.
Nice. Been reading more physical books recently. It's been great. I've been enjoying that. So we'll try to make some time for that too. Get my head out of the news cycle.
That sounds like a very good idea.
Yeah. All right. We will see everyone next week. Next week is a production of Group M. All of the views provided are meant for informational and educational purposes only and should not be taken as financial advice. If you have questions or a suggestion for the show, reach out to business.intelligence@groupm.com.